Welcome again to today's NOBIC talk, and we will talk about deconvolution together with Yangchen. So now I will start with a bit more, theory of deconvolution, and I will start by stating the problem. You probably know this, you have heard this many times already, but just to recapitulate, an image, a microscope image of a point-like object, so let's say a single fluorophore, which is be considered as a point source of light, is not a single geometrical point, but because of diffraction of light, it is something which we call point spread function. So it has some finite dimensions, and it can be theoretically described by distribution of light, called point area function. And for a lot of practical purposes, it is can be approximated by a Gaussian function, which describes quite well the central peak of an array function. And when we have not just a single point-like emitter, but some structures of finite dimensions, so something that could be considered as a result of a distribution of many point-like emitters. So then there will be the point spread function. Can imagine it that the image will be the ground truth with a point spread function sitting at each point. So that will, by having the point spread function at each point, all the features of the object will be blurred in the image. And mathematically, this is described by an operation called convolution. So the observed image, which is something like this, is the ideal image. That would be this thing convolved with the point spread function. So let's look at so that's stating the problem we are facing. And let's see another example. So this could be the ground truth. So it's obviously this is not a real image. It's a simulated image which consists of different stripes, and that's in a way useful to demonstrate what is the resolution of the image. So this is the profile, and then we perform convolution with a point spread function, which we simulate of the width of 220 nanometers, so something realistic for an optical microscope. And then we get an image which could look like this. And you can see that in some cases where we had two closely spaced lines, we are not able to resolve them in the observed image. And in other cases where there are multiple lines close to each other, it's quite hard to tell that the underlying structure. So that is the problem. And before we move on to the solution, let's briefly mention the representation of images in frequency domain. So this is something that might at first glance sound counterintuitive and maybe a bit complicated, but it's not really anything too complicated. It's very useful for understanding a lot of things related to resolution in microscopy. So imagine you have an image that has a periodic structure. So of course, one way how you can describe it is in the spatial domain, where this basically tells you that you have high intensity here, and if you move some distance, one period, then you have again high intensity, and then you move again one period, and there's again high intensity, and so on. And another way of describing it is in the terms of spatial frequency. Yeah, you say that everything repeats with a certain spatial frequency. So it's a very efficient way how to describe periodic structures. If I have structure with double the period, then I will see that the spatial frequency is larger. And this might not be, it's not so obvious, but you can do this also for an arbitrary image. It doesn't have to be periodic structures, because any distribution of intensity, any structure can be described as a series, it can be expanded in a series of harmonic functions. So that is what is called the Fourier transform. And so we have two alternative ways how we can describe an image. We can represent it in the spatial domain, which is the usual way how we observe images, but it can be alternatively described in the frequency domain. And these two are related by Fourier transform. And this might sound as something complicated operation. And of course, it is non-trivial mathematical operation analytically, but luckily it can be calculated very efficiently numerically. So in a lot of software packages, including things like Fiji, you have a function called fast Fourier transform, which is indeed very fast. So you don't need any powerful computer to calculate Fourier transforms of even large images. And what happens if I do the Fourier transform of the point spread function? So here I just look at half of the profile of the point spread function, I assume it's symmetrical. And its Fourier transform is something called optical transfer function. So that describes what is the presence of, okay, how well the optical system can transmit different spatial frequencies. So if there are low spatial frequencies, that means large structures, so they can be transmitted, of course, without problem. And as I'm going to higher spatial frequencies, which would describe smaller structures, as you can see here, basically even for a non-periodic case, I can say that I need a higher spatial frequency to describe a smaller structure, smaller feature, because I could basically, like, what would be the spatial frequency if such a small feature were the period of a periodic image? That's the way how I can understand it. So you see that the higher spatial frequencies are transmitted with reduced efficiency, and at some point the optical transfer function will be nearly zero. It goes down, decays, and that means that very high spatial frequencies are practically cannot be transmitted by the optical system. And that means that I cannot resolve such small features. So it's just a different way how to describe the resolution limit. Either I can use point spread function to explain it in the spatial domain or optical transfer functions to explain it in the frequency domain. And I would, at this point, I mentioned one thing, that you hear about resolution limit, and there's always some number mentioned, but it's very something like sharp cutoffs are something very unnatural, which you rarely find in real life. It's more of a concept which like people put on things to make it easier to understand. Okay, this is the resolution limit. If it's bigger, I should be able to resolve it. If it's smaller, well, I cannot expect to be able to resolve it. But as you see, things like point spread functions, optical transfer functions, they are not step functions. So this is something which is gradually decaying, and that's how things are in reality. So there's always some sort of gray zone, like here where the optical transfer function is going down. So I would so spatial frequencies, such spatial frequencies are transmitted less efficiently. So features, such small features, appear in the image with decaying contrast. So it's always a matter of where I put the boundary. Am I able to resolve it or not? But it doesn't mean that there's a sharp cutoff, and everything which is smaller than that, there's no information on it. So that's something which we should remember, and we can sometimes there's a gray zone, and we can get better or worse resolution depending on other factors as well. And what is here was noticing is that in frequency domain, convolution becomes a simple product. So the Fourier image of the observed image is the Fourier transform of the ideal image times Fourier transform of point spread function. So instead of something complicated like convolution, I have here a very simple mathematical operation, just a product of two images. So that brings me to, so then that means that I can do simple algebra here. So the Fourier transform of the ideal image is the Fourier transform of the observed image divided by the Fourier transform of the point spread function. So this brings us to the point that seems like there could be a very simple solution to the initial problem with which we started. Since we can easily get the Fourier transform of the ideal image, then we just perform the inverse Fourier transform and we get the ideal image, and we have no problem, right? That seems very promising. So let's give it a try. So we take this blurry image and we do this very simple mathematics, which is even a ordinary laptop can do it in no time. And what we get is this. So I have a solution. Isn't it great? We don't have to worry about point spread functions and things like that. We can always resolve everything that's in the image as long as we know the point spread function, which we can measure. So now you should be suspicious of what I'm showing here, because if the solution was as simple as this, then everyone would be doing such a simple operation, and no one would have to, there won't have to be any Nobel Prize for super resolution microscopy, because it could use just simple mathematics of the image, right? So there must be it must be a little bit more complicated than this. So you might be thinking, like, I have done something something fishy here, some cheating. Well, there was no cheating in this. This is really, but the problem is that we forgot about something which is very important and which was not present in this naive simulation. And we forgot about noise. And that's something which we can never escape. So every experiment in every acquired image will contain some noise. So let's add a little bit of noise to our simulated observed image. And we don't have to overdo it. So here, the signal to noise ratio is about 100. So this is something you don't get every day. You might have lower signal to noise ratios in most cases. So let's do the same thing. And you see the result is not that promising. Yeah, maybe we can see a little bit of a hint of this most prominent feature, but it's about all. So it failed miserably when we added quite modest noise. And of course, if we have even higher signal to noise ratios, then yes, we will get some, it might work to some extent, it will still be noisy, but we can see the features, but we are still, that will be still very idealized scenario, because there are other factors in reality, such as here we knew exact point spread function because it's all simulated, but in reality there will be uncertainties in the point spread function as well, and that will add further to the complications. So obviously so why even such a very modest noise makes so much problem? And to understand it, let's go back to optical transfer function, which I sketched here. And the optical transfer function, that's something which in mathematics is called the support of the Fourier transform of the image. So basically that the optical transfer function defines the frequency bandwidth of the information which can be present in the frequency domain image. So the blue curve, that would be the image. So it's all basically limited by the optical transfer function. So that's in the ideal image would contain any possible spatial frequencies, but then we multiply it by the optical transfer function, and that reduces, effectively suppresses all the higher frequency information. But that applies only to the information which is transmitted by the optical system. So that's the information we want to get. But the noise comes only when we detect the light. So the noise is not subject to this optical transfer function. So noise can, and actually has, the highest spatial frequencies that are possible in the image, because the noise varies from pixel to pixel. So the noise, and when we do the inversion, so we wanted to restore it by dividing it by the optical transfer function. That means where the optical transfer function is very low, we divided it by a very low number, so it's multiplying it by a huge number. So where it approaches nearly zero, we multiply it by a number that is approaching infinity. And here it's very low, but that's where we have the contribution of noise. So we amplify the noise very strongly. So that's why it becomes such a big problem. And the solution is we need to do some filtering in the frequency domain so that we only amplify the meaningful information and we avoid amplifying noise. So that is usually called Wiener filter after Norbert Wiener, and it doesn't apply only to deconvolution in frequency domain, but to any techniques which use frequency domain processing, such as structured illumination or area scan processing. So you always have there's some filtering, and you can usually there's some possibility to tune the filtering. So if you take broader bandwidth, you can get better resolution enhancement, but it's more sensitive to noise. If you take narrower bandwidth, it's more robust against noise, but you don't gain much in resolution. So we do a second attempt where we used some form of filtering, and you see it performs much better. Of course, we didn't get really the ground truth. It's still a little bit blurred, but it's better than the image, the observed image. So we get some improvement. But so this is sort of direct deconvolution using Fourier space. But in many, usually the microscopy image deconvolution is done by a different approach, which is iterative deconvolution. So that is based on we take some guess of the ideal image. We do convolution with point spread function. So this is not in Fourier frequency domain, this is in spatial domain. And we calculate an estimate of the observed image. So how do we get the initial guess? Usually the initial guess is chosen as the observed image, but in a way it doesn't matter. It could be anything. It could be an empty image, it could be a picture of Mickey Mouse, whatever. It will still converge. And then we compare the estimate, which we obtain here, with the actual observed image and calculate the residual image. And then based on that, we update our guess of the ideal image and do it again. And we keep doing it until the residual image becomes acceptably small, till it converges to self-consistence. And the different, so this is a general scheme for iterative deconvolution, and the different algorithms will differ in the way how you update the guess of the ideal image. So the simplest one is the basic additive update, where the subsequent guess is the current guess plus the residual image. Although it's not obvious from this, but somehow it was found that it converges to a good solution. It's a bit more sensitive to noise, and usually what is considered better algorithm is Richardson-Lucy or related algorithms, which used more advanced ways of updating the guess. So let's look at examples. So this is what we get with the basic additive update. This is for Richardson-Lucy. So you see it's, in this case, they look quite similar. And just for comparison, this is what we got with the direct deconvolution in frequency domain. Let's now look at what resolution we can get with this deconvolution procedure. So we take the result of the iterative deconvolution, for example, and sometimes, I mean, if you don't have any ground truth, then one way how you might be tempted to measure the resolution would be you take some narrow structure, like for example this line, and you measure the width of that line. And you see, well, it seems like we got 2 times improvement in resolution, because our point spread function was 220 nanometers, and this is approximately, and the fit gives us half of the point spread function width. But don't get over enthusiastic, because the width of a single line it's not a good measure of resolution, because you don't resolve anything here. Just can always make things narrower, but the resolution is how, if you can resolve 2 lines which are close to each other, that's a better measure of resolution. So let's look here. We know the ground truth in this case, so we know that there are 2 lines, but in this case we can't resolve them. They were 150 nanometers apart, and we cannot resolve them. Here there are another set of 2 lines, which were in this case 200 nanometers apart, and here we can resolve them. So yes, and they were not resolvable in the simulated observed image. So yes, we can improve the resolution a little bit, but of course this is an over-optimistic estimate, because it's based on a very incorrect way of estimating the resolution. So we can look at another example. Here again, 2 lines which are 200 nanometers apart. They are unresolvable in the after convolution with point spread function, but they become resolvable after the convolution. So yes, that's one thing which you can, the convolution can help you. So you can ask from an information theory perspective, like, because increasing resolution means increasing the information contents in the image. So where does the information come from? And a simple answer would be that because in deconvolution we use the knowledge of the point spread function. So that's the knowledge of the point spread function, which is the key to unlocking additional information that was not accessible in the measured image. This is just an example when we add more noise. Still, these algorithms work. And now some closing remarks. So the points, what I showed here was all just 2-dimensional case, but in reality, a point spread function is 3-dimensional. So you can do 3D deconvolution, and that is even better because we involve more information. So we use the 3D shape of the point spread function, so that contains more information than just 2D section of it, and we also leverage on the information which is in the neighboring plane. So even if we are interested in structures which are present only in one plane, it's still, if we want to have the best from the convolution, it's good to take multiple planes. Same again holds for methods like structured illumination or SIM. So in a way, principles are quite tightly linked. Another thing is that autofocus objects, they effectively contribute to the image with a broader point spread function. That's why they are not sharp, they are much more blurry in the image. So the knowledge of the in-focus point spread function helped us to remove these blurry backgrounds. So deconvolution can also do to some extent optical sectioning. So it could be an alternative to confocal imaging, to do wide field imaging followed by deconvolution. Of course, confocal imaging likely to have better performance, but in some cases this could be a viable alternative. And second, note that there are also alternatives to deconvolution. You may have noticed there's a Fiji package called CSDD, which is uses deep learning or AI for image processing. They also in the paper they showed how it can be used as an alternative to deconvolution, which is faster than iterative deconvolution. So they did it that they created synthetic ideal images, did convolution with point spread functions. So something similar to what I was showing here in the presentation. They created a large set of such images, such pairs of images, and trained a convolutional neuronal network on that. And then they used the neuronal network to process experimental observed images and get an sort of deconvolved image out of that. So I just for fun, I mean the example network which was mentioned in the paper and which is available in the package as an example to try was trained on something which simulated microtubule networks in a cell. So not exactly these stripes that I was showing. So just for fun, I tried to run it on my simulated image. And well, the result is not optimal, to say the least. So I'm not, don't take it that I'm saying that this is not a good approach. I think it's a very interesting approach, and like all the in many other areas of image processing, it's likely deep learning will become more and more important, and we will see more of it. And it has it's very promising. But of course, in this case, it's very important that it's trained on relevant data. So it's just a caution against blindly applying these methods when they haven't been trained on an appropriate data set, because by training the method, you somehow direct it to trying to reconstruct certain types of features. So like all these things are to a large extent a black box, which should be treated with due caution. But that's all from me. So I will, if there are any questions to what I have said, maybe ask now, and then Yangchen can continue. Any questions for the first time, for the second time, for the third time? So if no question at this moment, I will stop sharing my screen so Yangchen can share his screen. And of course, if you think of questions you want to ask, you can ask later. Okay, Yangchen.
Okay, thanks, Radek. Okay, so all right. So the major microscope brands that the systems you have in your facility, they often have a deconvolution algorithm in the software already. So because it's optimized for that specific system, you should use that if it's available. Otherwise, you can deconvolve using third-party software like Huygens or Fiji. So let's now try it on a 3D stack of HeLa cells. So these cells have a microtubule stain, in this case, M cherry tubulin. So when you acquire the image, you should have the Z slices go all the way to the end until it goes black, so that you can capture all the out of focus light from the cell at both ends of the stack. Yeah, so you can sort of see what it looks like here. And then, of course, you should crop it as closely as possible to the cell, to the region of interest, in order to save on computational resources. And you can also do some pre-processing to get a cleaner image. So this is raw data, and for example, I can do background subtraction to make the background more even, and let's just have a very quick one. 100 disable smoothing, and okay. So yeah, well, you can just click yes to process all 291, and I actually already done it. So I'll just use the image I already have. Okay, so after that, yeah, well, and you should actually be careful of overdoing the pre-processing so as not to create artifacts even before you start the deconvolution. Okay, and after you've finished pre-processing it, you just open the Deconvolution Lab 2 plugin here. Yeah, and that's the user interface. And what you can do is you just drag the image into the top, into the first one here. And then after that, you have to give it a PSF. Okay, so ideally you should acquire a stack of the actual PSF that you use during your acquisition, by using fluorescent beads, and use the actual experimental PSF for deconvolution. So let me just quickly show this. So for example, this is an actual PSF that was acquired from a microscope using a high-end objective, 40x 0.95. And you can see that it actually looks quite good. And in this case, you could probably simulate the PSF in software and you'll get away with it. Yeah, but the thing is, if you happen to be using the same objective, the very same system configuration a few months later, this might be what you get. You see that the PSF has actually changed beyond recognition. It looks something like chicken feet here. And if you look at the side view, it actually looks like a banana. It's no longer symmetric and it's skewed to one side. This could actually be because for example, the front lens of the objective was knocked out of alignment, or there's dirt or some other misalignment in the optical path. So in this situation, a simulated PSF, wouldn't account for these aberrations, and your deconvolution might be inaccurate. So if you're serious about deconvolution, I believe that you should always obtain the experimental PSF wherever possible. But nevertheless, you can simulate a PSF if you wish. So to do that, you could go to the PSF generator plugin in Fiji. Yeah, okay. And over here, you can choose from various mathematical models for the simulation. So I just choose this one, and over here, you have to enter the microscopic parameters. Like for example, in my case, it was immersed in water, so refractive index 1.33. And then wavelengths, the emission wavelengths was around 610. NA of the objective was 1.1. In my case, the pixel size was 104 nanometers, and the Z-stat was actually 100 nanometers. So the axial or the Z resolution of my system is actually about 1 micron. So we actually took the optical section 100 nanometers apart, which is way beyond oversampling, beyond the Nyquist frequency. So I think this is a bit like overdoing it, but it's always good to oversample more than less, especially if you are doing deconvolution. Okay, so for now I leave all the rest as they are, and I just click run. So it actually takes, I think it just takes a few seconds. Yeah, okay, so now you get a PSF, and then it looks something like that. Okay, so for now we just use this PSF. You just have to save it, and then after you have saved it, I've already saved a copy here, so I can just drag it into the this deconvolution lab 2 plugin, the second row, which is a PSF. Okay, and then for the algorithm, you can choose from many different types. So, for example, there's a regularized inverse filter that Radek was talking about, and also some of the iterative algorithms like Richardson-Lucy, for example. So I'm not going to actually run it because it will take time. I've already run some examples and I'll show you now. Okay, so let's close this. Okay, let me make this image smaller. Okay, so this is the original image. Okay, and then I'm going to show you the regularized inverse filter, which is a direct deconvolution that Radek first talked about. That's sort of susceptible to noise and so on. Okay, so the first one shows the inverse filter without regularization, which means without smoothing out the noise. And if I try to make it bigger, and if I go through the slices, you see that it has actually over amplified the noise. You can see a lot of artifacts that are not there in the like, you know, all these small little blotches here and there. So it has tried to recover a lot of, I mean, it has recovered a lot of detail, but a lot of that detail is actually was actually the noise and the artifacts resulting from the noise, and the microtubules are sort of half buried in the noise. And if you look at in the interest of time, I'll go to the other, to the one that has a lot of smoothing applied, the other extreme. And so what happens is that you can see that it has over smoothed out all the detail. So there's too much smoothing. Remove the noise and remove the structure as well. And another interesting phenomenon is that in both these examples, you can see a sort of bending around the edges of the cell. You see all these black, dark and bright bands or stripes around the cells, and that's, yeah, you can see it here as well. And part of that is actually from this particular phenomenon that happens when there's a sudden large change in intensity, you know, from the edge of the cell, which is quite bright, to the background, which is quite dark. So when there's this sudden large change in intensity at the boundary of the cell, and when you try to do a Fourier transform, you know, the kind of Fourier transform that Radek was talking about during the deconvolution process, it actually generates this particular artifact, which I can just quickly show using this Fourier applet. This is an online Fourier applet by Paul Falstadt, which you can find online. And so if I switch this to square, so basically this squarish rectangular pattern here represents the cell. So, you know, you have the cell and the background and the cell, there's a sharp edge. And when you actually try to fit it to a Fourier series of sine curves, so this makes it a bit clearer. Yeah, you see this overshoot here. It overshoots the actual signal, and here it undershoots here. Yeah, so that's what produces the striping, the rigging artifact. And of course, if you actually increase the number of terms in the Fourier series, you actually reduce the artifacts, but they are still there. Okay, yeah, so you have to be careful of this. And now let's have a look at what happens when you try the Richardson-Lucy algorithm. So that's the iterative algorithm that Radek was talking about. Okay, so of course, you can choose to do a different number of iterations, and it will try to get closer and closer to the actual structure. Let me find suitable area. Yeah, here. Okay. So, okay, at first I tried 5 iterations, so that's not very much. If I go to the same slice here, you can see that the noise is still there. So on the left is the original image, and on the right is the deconvolved. So the noise is there still, but you actually see that the microtubules are coming out a bit more clearly. And then if you go to say, okay, let's try 50. So you do 50 iterations, which is on the high side already. Hang on, just make it a bit brighter. Yeah. And, go to slice 44. Okay. Yeah. And yeah, that's sort of the other extreme that you can see the contrast quite clearly. So it seems that the algorithm it actually performs considerably better than the regularized inverse filter earlier on, in that it manages to have a very good noise control, and it actually makes the microtubules much more defined. Although when you do this, you also always have to be very careful to look out for artifacts and make sure that what you're seeing are the actual structures and not artifacts. Yeah, but overall, it does seem to have done a pretty okay job. So if you actually do fewer iterations, like 20 iterations, then yeah, it will be actually not so drastic. So over here, I think the contrast is a bit too much. Yeah, because 50 iterations is a lot. And an interesting artifact that I encountered when I went up to 100 iterations, I can show you, is the so-called blooming artifact. So if you go through the slices, it's here. What happens is that, let me just bump up yeah. So the rest of it is fine until you get to a particular slice, just one slice number 33. It suddenly blooms and explodes into a super huge brightness and contrast. And then after that, it goes back down. Yeah, so you've got to watch out for this one as well, even when you're using iterative algorithms. And that's very often that's caused by some instability in the algorithm when it's trying to reconstruct the original structure. Yeah, so I guess as these examples show, it's very important to compare the result with the raw data. And unfortunately, it's a manual and somewhat subjective process, a bit like witchcraft, actually. And you have to be very, very careful about not creating artifacts and about your actual PSF and so on, especially if you're trying to do quantitative analysis with the deconvolved data. Yeah, but I think it can be very beneficial, especially if you're doing live imaging with very weak signals, and if you are trying to study really tiny structures at the resolution limit of your system. Yeah, and to end off, I'd just like to quickly show you the CSB deep that Radek tried to deconvolve, used to use the deep learning to reproduce his stripes. So I actually tried it with because it was designed for microtubules. So I tried it on my microtubule image. And it creates a very neat result. So you can see that supposedly the microtubules have come out very, very nicely. Yeah, but I mean, I'm not an expert in microtubules actually. I'm a little bit skeptical of this because it looks a bit just too clean and yeah, it's too clean. Perhaps someone who has more experience with microtubules could comment on whether this is actually accurate or not and represents reality. Yeah, so this is what the CSB Deep plugin will get you from an image such as mine. You don't actually have to provide it with any PSF. You don't have to do any settings. You just basically give it the image and click run and set a few settings such as the number of tiles you want and so on, and it will just do it automatically. Okay, yeah, so that's it for now, and I actually wish to thank my colleagues. So many of my colleagues who have shared their insights and enhanced my knowledge. And I'm also grateful to Nianzi from NUS who prepared the sample used in my demo, and Zheng Chao and Wei Jia who actually acquired the test image that you were seeing, that you looked at. And then I did the deconvolution on that. Yeah, so thank you.